Welcome to the Business of Tattooing, the podcast that goes beyond the ink to dive deep into the industry, the hustle, and what it really takes to succeed in the world of tattooing. I'm Rob Smead, founder of Electrum Supply, and your guide through the business side of this ever-evolving art form. Each week, we'll break down the latest trends, tackle the challenges artists face, and sit down with industry pros to talk shop, unfiltered and straight to the point. Whether you're an artist, a shop owner, or just someone who loves the craft, this is the podcast built for you. So, sharpen your skills, level up your business, and let's get to work. This is the Business of Tattooing. From the neon-lit chaos of Los Angeles to the gothic glow of Las Vegas, this week's guest has spent more than 30 years tattooing nightmares into daydreams. He's the king of Halloween tattoos, a master of the macabre, and one of the rare few who's not just inked skin, but etched a legacy. Shaun Kama's journey began under the watchful eye of the legendary Mark Mahoney at Shamrock Studios in the early 90s, and he's been haunting the industry ever since. He's a painter, an illustrator, a published author, and a fixture at the Punk Rock Museum where ink and attitude collide daily. Whether he's tattooing at horror conventions, jamming with bands, or rolling across the country with Raven's Nest Productions, Shaun isn't just creating tattoos, he's curating culture. Halloween isn't just a season to him, it's a lifestyle. So fire up your machines and dim the lights, because this week we're diving into the dark arts with the one and only Shaun Kama.
Very nice intro. Thank you for all of that.
Is that good?
Yeah, that's a great intro. I think that was, just well said, and it encompasses everything that I'm all about pretty much. So I guess we'll let people at home. I'll see you later. That was it.
Well, you got a lot going on, and I've been digging into a lot of your history over the past couple of weeks, just trying to prep for this interview. And I told you the first time that we talked on the phone after James introduced us, I was like, it's really odd that we haven't run into each other before now because we have so many friends in common in the industry. And I saw some pictures of people that you were with, and I was like, man, that's crazy that I've never run into you. But as soon as I saw Halloween tattoos in your email address, I was like, wait a second. I was like, I know Halloween tattoos because I've been following your Instagram for quite some time and your tattoo work. And so then I put two and two together and I was like, oh shit. Okay. I know who this guy is.
That's cool to hear. It's nice to hear that that the moniker Halloween tattoos preceded me. Yeah, I was lucky enough to. You can imagine that something like that would be sought after. Something as simple as Halloween tattoos as your business name, your LLC or whatever. It just is interesting because you couldn't just get that nowadays. It's too deep. So there's somebody out there just waiting for me to die so they can grab that.
They can't live up to your legacy though. See, that's the problem.
Right. Well, we'll see. Hopefully I still got some time to build that further and further substantiate the idea that it can't be done. That's it. It dies with me.
Yeah. It should. And yeah, so James just introduced you as Shaun. He didn't say your last name or anything. So I just had no idea who you were just other than Shaun. So got
it. Well, there's no reason other than that initially. I think, it's all right. Anyways, yeah, it's nice to hear that. And I had, certainly heard of Electrum, through the tattoo industry and whatnot. I think there are interesting to what you were saying that we had met. There's a number of people that I haven't met in the industry that have been around me, or we have mutual associates, right? In some cases, friends, but certainly associates. A lot of them, in a lot of cases, and I'm not sure what to attribute that to exactly, but I would say that part of it is that. As long as I've been in the industry and as many different brands and individuals that I've been able to work with and whatnot, never has there been a time where I've really, I don't even know how to put this properly, but I've always lived kind of on the fringe of the tattoo industry, although being completely absorbed in it all the time. Because I have other interests and other things, it wasn't the only primary thing that I kind of, put my focus on, I think. And as a result of kind of having a wider scope previously too, you just don't run into those people, but you have some sort of knowledge of them existing and what they're all about. I guess.
Sure. Yeah, I totally get that. I'm more of an introvert myself, so it's like I'm not the type of person that just kind of goes up to a convention and just introduce myself to someone who I've looked up to in the industry for a long time. I'm more shy in my approach, and I kind of have to meet people by introduction more or less. So,
Okay.
same. I'm right there with you, where I've not met a lot of people that I certainly know in the industry. I haven't really met face to face, but I feel that
That's
completely.
cool. And more recently, because when just I think through osmosis and through longevity, I think and consistency, it's kind of culminated more recently for me to where I am actually meeting and working with many of these people that I've heard about over the last couple of decades or whatever as they were coming up. One of the things that I noticed with the time that I got into the industry and then started being taken more seriously because I started taking it more seriously is that a lot of those people over the last 10 to 2 decades, 10 years to 2 decades, have many of them have come up to a place where they wanted to be, and so when we met or when we became familiar with each other, say, and maybe didn't even meet, uh, they were kind of in the genesis of what they are now, and myself included in that. So it's kind of a cool time to be meeting everybody because some of these people have been doing it consistently for 10, 15, 20 years, and we're kind of just meeting for the first time, uh, but we're all kind of in the same kind of good place, and um, it's a cool place to be, right now for
Yeah,
me, with everything going on personally.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so let's just get into a little bit of your history and your introduction into the tattoo industry. Kind of what got you interested in tattooing. Obviously you've got a artistic background, just a very broad artistic background, I should say. And so kind of where did that all start for you? You were born in Germany, right?
Yeah, well, art, has always been with me, fortunately, in terms of the desire to draw or create, and it just was one of these natural things that you grow up with, and maybe due to your personal desire to do it, as well as whatever your surroundings were encouraging you to continue with that. In addition to being something that you like to do, it's just that art has been the first passion that I ever felt in a natural way in terms of drawing on paper, creating all this kind of thing. And it's I can't tell you why. There's no psychological trauma. There wasn't something that happened and then like pushed me into being into darker and more obscure and aberrational things. It was just something that was naturally built in. I know as a kid, when you're a little kid, obviously, and you're in public schooling and whatnot, or any kind of schooling, and they see a small child drawing creepy stuff or things that are not like from the normal nature that kids draw, like baseball bats and people doing sports or whatever they might draw. The teachers will then question, well, are you okay? Are you psychologically fine? Were you someone hold your hand to a burner when you were a child? They just don't know. But the truth is, it was just that way, and there was a period of time jumping forward, and we'll jump back. It'll be like Tarantino. There was a period of time where I got really into music, and music's been a huge part of my life always. And I was able to, what I did do is put like art and tattooing kind of on the back burner because the focus was just touring and trying to have fun with punk rock and stuff. And then it really definitely circled back around and became the primary focus later on in life. Although it was strongly there throughout the entire time, always
Okay.
part of the tattoo industry. So going back to the initial question, yeah, I was born in Heidelberg, Germany, and I have no recollection of that at all. And my only recollection of Germany was later on when I was touring and spending time in Europe and whatnot. And the reason I was born in Germany is because I had military parents, and both my parents were in Vietnam. My mom was a nurse in Vietnam, and she met my dad there. So it would be formative for them both. And my dad was in combat and he retired as a lieutenant colonel eventually. And he definitely saw a lot of awful things, we talked about over the years, but because he and her went in with a strong moral compass as well as strong ideology, and neither one of them were into drugs or substances. They came out fine, considering it all, psychologically and whatnot. And so I had the luck of having a really strong female role model early on because my dad wasn't there in the beginning, and then later on we developed a very strong bond, and that's kind of where I started, was from the military family thing, and so that's kind of been instilled in me. It's probably part of the reason why ultimately I like to travel a lot, because my mom, got me traveling young, seeing a lot of things, seeing a lot of cultures and whatnot, as well as having a strong understanding of what it is to be able to do what you want to here in the United States. And the reason you're able to do that is because, in a greater sense, would be because of people like my mother and father, who took the time to enlist and make it possible for me to draw all the time. So that's kind of part of who I am, in a greater regard. And so artistically, man, there's never been a time that I haven't drawn.
Sure.
And it happened to then develop into a career, and it wasn't planned. I'm going to tell you guys that right up front. There was no real plan except for to try to do something that you enjoy for a living, knowing that you don't want to work for the man. And there's a couple things that I tried that I knew that I didn't want to do, and trying to develop a way to do that under your own terms, and still live comfortably.
Yeah.
And so that happened over the course of my life so far, but it wasn't this extensive plan. And I would say nowadays you absolutely need a plan. You can't do it like that anymore.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are still trying though. Did your parents really encourage your art and your artistic desires and all that? Like they pushed you into that and kind of supported that the whole time?
Totally, yeah. I mean, because I grew up with my mom exclusively, so I didn't really have a real strong relationship with my father until I was in my late teens, right? So the formative years I spent with my mom, who, like I said, was, because she was an extremely strong woman. I mean, she taught me how to shoot guns, and she taught me how to actually do everything that kind of like a dad would do.
Sure.
To a degree. And there was a period of time later in life where my brother stepped in and kind of helped me to be not a wayward Cain. There was a period we're kind of jumping around where he worked as a real strong father figure for me for a few years, and until we became kind of peers. And then when he passed away, my dad really, really stepped in then. And, we had more of an adult relationship, but, I mean, I don't know if you know, but I mean, I think you see it in retrospect. Your parents were just people making really dumb decisions too. We're making emotional decisions, and they're superheroes to you, but you see their folly, and you forgive them instantly for the things that they were trying to figure out when you were growing up, as long as they weren't too detrimental to you. And so I was fortunate enough to have a mom that was very supportive and strong, and led by example, as well as a father and a brother who ultimately stood up and tried to help me develop and be the person that I've become today. And part of that too was getting back to what you're talking about. When I started tattooing, it was at Shamrock, and it was that like year and a half, 2 year period that I spent there at Shamrock Tattoo, the original one on 3rd Street, was such an incredibly formative time in hindsight, and such important things developed from that period of time. My relationship with my wife, who would become my wife, I met in that year and a half, 2 year period, and everything that I've become, like on from a tattoo artist point of view, and partially artistically, and being in the punk rock and music scene simultaneously all came from that 2 year period of like moving to Los Angeles in like 1990, and then everything culminating by the end of 92. And literally it's so funny how that little 24-month period changed my fucking life,
Yeah.
like dramatically forever.
Wow. So how did you end up meeting Mark? I mean, how did that even come about?
Well, it wasn't intentional. It was the strangest thing. I had a friend who was working. See, the thing was too, look, to circle back around, I didn't really know who Mark was at the time, right? Like I had a friend that was working for the studio on 3rd Street. Like I'm a kid from Orange County and from Hawaiian descent. But I lived in Orange County after we moved from the East Coast, which is, a whole other story. Maybe we'll pop rock around too. And I was, wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do, but I had been drawing and doing kind of art and things like this related growing up my whole life, finding ways to make money doing art. And so when I moved to LA and I moved there to join a band called Hello Disaster that was, we can maybe get into, it was cool. It was a popular, cool act at the time. And I moved up there just on a whim because I had crashed my car. I didn't have any wheels and I just needed to get into music, right? So I'm like, fuck it, living on a couch, riding a bike, riding a skateboard. I'm 2021, this kind of a thing. I'm up there in LA, trying to do my thing. And this cat asked me if I want to do drawings and be a helper for Shamrock Studios. And I'm like, well, what is Shamrock Studio? They said, well, hey, this is Mark Mahoney's studio. He's a famous tattoo artist. And my buddy was getting into something else at the time. And they needed someone to fill his spot. And at the time, I was in Hello Disaster and I was working at Robert Wayne's Shoes on Melrose. And incidentally, Melrose was actually really kind of happening back then. It was still like a thing to do. So it's kind of fun. But I would say that like selling shoes was not my trip, and I fucking hated every minute of being on every single minute of it. I mean, as I recall, and so the idea of making less money but working not for the man, and drawing pictures for this particular artist who was working there that I won't even mention. But so I went there to draw for him, and he was working for Mark. So at the time, it was this artist. We'll call him B,
Okay.
for lack of a better term. And at that time, Bob Vessels, who you may know or may have heard of, was tattooing there. Mark Mahoney was in the back room tattooing, and I met him through this cat B. And eventually, just to kind of touch on Shamrock at that period of time. There's this kid named Frankie Walden from Long Beach that was there, who was kind of cool. And Mike Brown, of course, and you've heard of Mike Brown. He was there a bit, at that period of time too. It was really an interesting time in the tattoo industry, as well as just in music and in general.
Yeah.
The early 90s was pretty pivotal, although we didn't know it living through it. At that time, how distinctly strange it was compared to now. And so yeah, I ended up. They needed a helper, and what that meant at the time is something vastly different than what being an assistant and helper is today. And we can get into that if you want to or whatever. But that was initially how I got in there, unbeknownst, not knowing who Mark was until I really got into it. Didn't go in there really expecting to be a tattoo artist. I mean, I know a lot of people will probably be pissed about that. But I went in to go, I didn't want to work for the man. I would rather draw and get paid to do that and be able to do punk rock and live in my little shitty apartment with a bunch of people than have a normal job, and not be down. And so that's kind of how it played out. I mean, for the longest time, I was just kind of drawing and cleaning the bathroom and all these kind of things that go along with that and running errands. And then it was like, hey, you want to learn how to tattoo? And this cat B was kind of teaching me, but he was not. In hindsight, he wasn't really that great of a tattoo artist, but you don't really know as a kid what's up. I was like 20, and I had moved up to LA at 19, 20. It was right at that period of time. I previous to that too, I worked at this place called Mosquito Head that was run by these two really interesting cats that everybody was doing heroin at that time.
Oh, yeah.
And They're all on heroin too. But we were just we were bleaching T-shirts, and then they would silk spray and stuff on them, like Cool Bands and stuff. And that this bleached T-shirt look was very popular at the time in the early '90s with like Lords of the New Church or the Damned and stuff
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the Cramp. And me and a bunch of people in rock and roll would do that. And this was right before I got in with the Mahoney thing. I was just trying to keep my head above water in Los Angeles with nothing. And so it ended up what it ended up happening was about halfway through that, this one cat kind of wasn't around, and he was getting into all kinds of crazy shit in terms of personally, right? The person that brought me in to apprentice and be a helper had a lot of things that preoccupied his time besides tattooing. We can just put it that way.
Sure, sure.
And so he was busy doing that stuff. And so Mark needed someone to help out. So, I mean, whereas it started as like me running errands for Mark and doing stuff that Mark needed, then he was like, hey, Holmes, come here, let me, and then it's me asking him questions and sitting there and talking to him about stuff. Now, in the meantime, he's showing me how to make needles. Bob Vessels did the same thing. Like, I don't know if people at home really have to even fuck with this at all, but we sat in a little tiny room that had kind of like fairly decent lighting and and you would have these loose needles, different sharps, usually long taper, and you would have a liquid flux, and you would you make these needles by hand, and you put them on a needle bar, and you get calluses on your fucking fingers, and your eyes burn from the little flux smoke cloud that goes up James Dean, and your right eye is just fucking on fire while you're holding all these needles. And we were making single needles back then, and so I learned how to do single needle tattooing before I learned how to do anything else from Mark. Before I even learned how to do a shader, I learned how to line with a single needle, which was a total trip.
Yeah, that's crazy because I don't know.
Let me stop. Let's get some input from you now.
No, I think that's great. I wanna dive a little bit more into what it means to be an assistant back then versus today. I think that was an interesting comment that you made, and I kind of want to touch on that a little bit and just kind of get your ideas around that, because that kind of stuck out to me.
Well, okay, so being an assistant today versus being an assistant in the 90s. I can only speak for my experience. All right. I mean, and I've heard that other people during that time had similar experiences myself. But, I don't want anybody at home to think this was just the way it was across the board, because nothing's like that.
Right.
Now, there were a few people that were there at the early Shamrock with me. Like, I'm going to be careful about which names I drop through this whole thing. That's why I'm, using certain letters and things like that. But I think it's fine with these people kind of to talk about it. So early on at that early Shamrock stage, and I was a little foggy because it was a crazy fucking time. But Tom Tilden, who is still a good friend of mine, who went on to work with Mikey Montoya and, friends with Tommy Montoya, they opened up a shop, a while back, and he was there, and he still owns that shop, man. What the fuck is it called? It'll come to me. I'm spaced out on what Tom's shop is right now. But it's in California. I'm sorry, Tom. Sorry, I should know. Anyways, but he was there in the early days when all this stuff was going on. And so is this guy, Frank Ball, who is still an associate of mine. And he has a son that tattoos and stuff now. It's crazy because it's, generations later. And, these people that you worked with when you were kids, now have families, and people in their family tattoo. It's the wildest thing. And so that was kind of interesting. And so back then, when you were being it was more, they called it a helper back then more than an assistant. I think an assistant almost sounds like almost a better term. But as a helper, you did whatever the artist really needed you to do back then. And sometimes the artist asked you to do things that were absolutely not tattoo related at all. And and you had to make that moral or that decision, that idealistic decision at that moment, And the cool thing was that you were 19 to 21, so you had way more I say you, I'm talking about me, had way more or less, I had a lot less to lose and, so much to gain. And I had a young mind. So, in hindsight, some of the things that I did do, yeah, I sure as fuck wouldn't do it. I didn't see any of the danger in some of the things that you would kind of mess around with back then,
Sure.
but a lot of us were like that, right?
Sure, sure. Yeah, it was a
You know what I
crazy
mean?
time
You're
for
willing to
sure.
take more chance.
Yeah, that was a crazy time for sure. But now,
Okay.
one thing I want to kind of touch on and just get some distinction between is that you're saying helper, like you were a shop helper. You didn't go in there to really learn how to tattoo. You went in there to draw and do some help things around the shop. What's the difference between a helper and an actual apprentice?
Well, yeah, I mean that's an interesting distinction, and I think that's that's going to be something that's going to be subjective, right? But in this particular case, going in as a helper, I didn't really, I mean, I didn't even think at that particular time, strangely, and this may be odd to people at home, but it didn't occur to me that like, oh, I want to be a tattoo artist right now. Like that's what I'm going in here to do. Because I didn't know who Mark was. I only really loosely, I didn't even know who the guy was that I was going to kind of be his helper. I just knew that it was a job that entailed like subculture, and I would be drawing for people.
Right.
And drawing is what I get paid to do. I didn't know how dreary the pay would be because I mean, the economy was different back then. I mean, you would make like $20 from each person that was tattooing if you worked for them. And so that at the end of a day, you would make like if I came home with like $80, I was killing it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
For the day.
I mean, obviously, $80 did go a little bit further back then, but still, it was kind of that was kind of how you got paid. It was just according to what you did. It was kind of like what you did for each artist, and then how well they did, and then how generous they were feeling that day. Or how shitty they were feeling that day might reflect on how well you got paid.
Sure.
You just never. You had to ask for things and stuff too. But you would, you would. One of the distinction too would be that like if you're apprenticing, which it ended up turning into, I am learning how to build needles. I'm learning how to deal with customers. I'm working the front of the shop. I'm the go-between. I'm the liaison between the artist and the clients that are coming in and wanting things. You're learning how to price tattoos, and that's what it developed into, just through osmosis. In a natural way.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you're sitting there with them, and you're saying, "Hey, Mark, why do you put the needle out to that length at the end of your or how far does the needle stick out, and then back then it was all coil machines, so you were saying you were getting in there and you're like, okay, well, why they would say you want this to be a nickel, the nickel width. They would use metaphors like that. If you're going to be if you're going to be lining, you want to hit a little harder, so you might want it to be like a dime or something, and it was those kind of like loose deals.
Sure.
And that's how you learned how to tattoo back then, and by making needles and kind of learning about the way a coil machine runs. It was never a thing where like you have to tear this machine apart and put it back together and build your own machine. It wasn't that kind of apprenticeship.
Sure.
But it was like, okay, here, let me tell you, if I'm feeling good today, hey, Holmes, come here, let's, talk about this kind of thing. And with Mark, it was a lot, it was learning about how to deal with people and having a personality and understanding, I think, the things that are really hard taught. You know how to read people's reactions to the things that you say when they're talking about what they want in a tattoo, and how to refine people's ideas down to something that's habitable, that will work on their skin in a way that won't be a shit show. To refine their ideas into something and to push them in a direction that is probably a more beneficial one for them.
Sure.
And how their tattoo is going to turn out and whatnot. And then another thing that I learned absolutely was a whole bunch of shit not to do.
How big was how big was the focus on?
Not to, I mean, like you're watching people and you're watching the way they're doing things, and you see, like you say, hey, that's not going to work for me, and you keep that, and you say, hey, man, don't do that. I mean, I think you learn if you're being, if you're really listening and you're really watching from any adult, you're going to see like what not to do as much as what to do. And I learned that was equally as valuable with the things not to do.
Right.
One of the things to do was don't do drugs.
Like when you're tattooing.
There's a lot of things,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. So how big was the focus on, like, not necessarily in that studio particular, but back in that time period, in your experience, how much was the focus on like safety and like was the Board of Health coming into shops back then, or like, I mean,
no.
what was that scene like?
Okay, so back in the early '90s, it was still Wild Westy. They had done the first Inkslingers ball at the Palladium, and so I had only been tattooing, a few months, and we went to the second Inkslingers ball, and I was tattooing there, and whatever I was, however old I was, 20, I guess, if I think back, and it was a time where informationally things just weren't accessible, and if you didn't have um, the the cachet or the clout of having somebody behind you in the industry that also had cachet and clout, like you weren't really anything, and you couldn't get anywhere. It really back then, and I didn't even really, honestly, in hindsight, I didn't really realize that at all. Because you're just a naive kid. I was a naive kid from Orange County that grew up in punk rock and
Yeah.
surfing and stuff like this, and whatever. I was, again, an introvert that was trying to be an extrovert. I had to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
I had to learn. I had to learn how to communicate and how to take social cues. It wasn't something that just kind of came innately to me.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a whole other road to go down another time. But it was something that I had to develop. I had to develop being a leader, and it's an interesting thing that you can develop into that. By even if you weren't necessarily innately born into that, it's something that you can definitely develop. But jumping back with the whole apprenticeship deal, it's just vastly different. I wouldn't recommend that people that are apprenticing now have to go through some of the things, the character building things that I went through as an apprentice or as a helper.
Sure.
Some of the shit is I mean, it's maybe not even cool. It's not that cool at all. However, with that fucking being said, it was all character building, and there's also a sense today that without that, the dichotomy, the same thing in music and everything. You need that edginess. There's the cool thing about tattooing back then. It was a complete subculture, and that was what they used to even talk about. Even currently, they used, or very contemporarily, Shamrock used to have some sort of a phrase, where like highbrow and lowbrow meet, where subculture and high culture collide. Where people are interested in the shadiness and the little bit of the seediness and the underground, not the uncleanliness, but the way that tattooing used to be was the way that punk rock used to be, or anything that was really, really edgy at one time, but because it's become so abundant, so omnipresent, that its effect isn't quite the same, never will be, but we have to accept that and find new ways to value it.
Right. No, that's a good way to say that, because yeah, definitely used to be a lot more mysterious. Now it's a lot more mainstream. So yeah, you sum that up well.
Well, they used to use violence.
What's that?
There was doing and things like
that. Oh
yeah,
it was totally, absolutely.
You know how it is. I mean, if you opened a shop, if you didn't follow certain codes, when I first started out, and I'm sure this was the way it was before that, based on everybody that's ever told me anything about it, especially like Rick Walters, Tennessee Dave. Those two people I spent a lot of time with, and they told me a lot. They're, Rick Walters is my tattoo bloodline on the West Coast, for a number of different reasons. But the Colonel Todd, Mark Mahoney Association puts that together, and the stories that he told me alone about old school tattooing definitely supports what I'm saying now. And basically, when it changed in my eyes was when there was kind of a perfect storm from old school apprentice, old school what's going on, you know, really trying to figure out how to tattoo and wondering if you're getting the right information from people. And because everything's analog and you have to build everything, and even the tattoo industry itself and the technology there behind it, inks and everything that goes along with it, we're in the very infant stages of development. Today they're, far surpassed that. But because of all of those things, it took a little longer to learn how to tattoo. And the people that were at the top of their game back then too, um, long standing in the industry, it was a different, things happened way slower at that particular time for a number of different reasons.
Sure.
And so that's when you see people today that learn how to tattoo pretty quickly and they develop really great skills very fast. It's as a result of everything that's culminated up until now to make it possible for them to do that. And what happened was, I think, when things really changed was obviously when it went on TV. And part of what happened during that time, from my experience, is that previous to that, people that got into tattooing didn't really have art backgrounds at all necessarily. I mean, some people did, I did, but not everybody. You could be a tattoo artist and not be an artist, and
right,
that.
Right.
So as soon as people started getting out of art college at that particular time, where simultaneously there was these early TV shows that were getting the general public to know that tattooing isn't so taboo and that it can be kind of beautiful and there's a lot that can be done with it. These people that got out of art school and college suddenly didn't have these positions that they necessarily wanted to, or they wanted to make money quickly, but to be in fine art, to be in even lowbrow art, it was a long road to making money. And you would see back then these people like Robert Williams or Coop or whoever you might be looking up to, artists before that, them as these icons. But the fucking road to get from getting out of college to there is so long, you don't even know how you're going to do it. So suddenly you're like, well, hey, I could make $100 an hour, which was kind of the going huge rate back then, tattooing, and put all these skills to work with that. So then suddenly the ceiling on tattooing and what was available to get, to get as far as artistic quality just changed, and then when they hit TV and people saw it change, that started changing the dynamic of the industry. And then because it got popular, people started making a lot of money. When a lot of money comes into it, government starts looking at it. People start paying their taxes. They're like, hey, I don't need to do that. The IRS starts looking at it. And then you have different other agencies in the government start looking at it. And things have turned into what they are today, which is a fusion of everything that I just talked about in a hyperbolic situation.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think that's good because it was kind of like it was the time kind of when shops started transitioning from flash shops into more custom art studios, and you can go in and get a portrait of your dog or your mom if you want to, and that was unheard of before really TV kind of took things mainstream, I think too, so.
Yeah. And Mark that was a really amazing thing about him. He was a really good artist, like that's where his strengths were. And so, when he was on his A game back then, man, like he was unstoppable, and it was really interesting to be around him. I was very fortunate to have been around him for the short time that I was and learning what I did from him. And Bob Vessels too. He did teach me some stuff. He really taught me about lining. He doesn't get as much credit as Mark, but he's still around doing stuff. I've seen Bob Vessels recently, and he's cool. He's doing all right. Always be grateful for that opportunity. As odd as it was back then, and as many really weird things that I had to get into, I'd be always forever grateful. There's a crazy story that came out of that that maybe we should talk about.
Yeah.
I know you guys want stories.
Yeah, let's do it.
And that's the beauty of this kind of conversations are. I mean, I can make it brief, but there's a bit of tattoo history, and I won't get into too many of the details because it can get pretty dicey. But let's just say that the guy that I was tattooing, that I came there to be a helper for at Shamrock, at a certain point, because of a number of different influences, and drugs were one of them. they decided that it was no longer Mark's shop, but it was their shop.
Oh,
And the people that were apprenticing there are going to work for him, like it was straight up OPP.
wow.
You know me, straight up other people's property for lack of a term. And at that time, Mark was in like a vulnerable place as a result of a number of different things that I won't get
Sure.
into. And there was a lot of people around then that were not necessarily positive influences. And it's not something that you see in the moment. Like, again, I was a kid, so I'm just there. I was pretty enamored by it all. You know, there was guns and there was things that like I wasn't around, you know, and there was a subculture of tattooing and there was interesting celebrities that would come by and there were sketchy fucking people that would come by. And it was all kind of, it was all very interesting to me. You know what I mean? And it wasn't like, there was nothing glamorous about it, but the edginess of it and the kind of the edgy punk rock aspect of it, for lack of a better term, was really, really like the subculture was really, really, for me, where I wanted to be at the time. And it was such an interesting time. You know, they filmed the True Romance film. You remember that movie? Yeah. Man, that tattoo scene in there, right? That's at the Shamrock that I was at. And my buddy Johnny was the helper in that scene. He was in my punk rock clique back then when I was in Hell of Disaster. And he ended up being there. And, you know, Mark at that time, he drew up a True Romance logo for Tony Scott, which they used, you know, on like the DVD and whatnot. And he ended up drawing like the little cherub that said Alabama, you know, and that was all happening while I was there. And that was really, that was kind of cool, you know. And right after that happened, this whole incident happened where one of the artists that brought me in decided he was going to take over the shop for his own fucking personal reasons. And I was pretty young, and so was, I can't speak for Tom and Frank about how they felt about it all, but it seemed as if we all felt like, holy shit, this guy's psychotic and he's going to kill us if we don't get or work for him. You know, so like, you know, I had foolishly purchased a shotgun from him that, if I recall, it was like $200. I'd paid him $100 for it, and I still owed him $100. This is something that'll be important later on in the story. And so I had just met like the month before or the weeks before, a group of girls came in and were getting tattooed, and they were in the acting and dancing and commercial and movie industry. And one of them would end up being my wife, Carla, eventually. But I would meet her at Shamrock in this group of girls that came in, and they were getting tattooed and whatnot, and this whole deal. And you know, I was like, hey, you want to see my band? She was like, yeah, I would. And I was like, all right, this is cool, man. All right. So I just met this girl who would eventually become my girlfriend and wife in the long run. So Bubba says he's going to take over the shop one day, and he does. And he comes in there, and he had, or B, I should say, he comes in with guns and things like that. And then he left after he took over the shop to go do whatever notorious thing he was going to do, some malevolent plan. And I put all my shit in a box, and I called Carla, and I said, hey, can you come pick me up? And this guy's fucking insane. And he's taken a tattoo shop, and he said if I don't work for him, he's going to fuck me up. And I don't even recall what Frank and Tom were doing at that point, but they were probably tripping the same way. They have their own stories about it. And so I bail the shop, and she picks me up in spite of her friend going, are you sure you want to pick this guy up? You just met him. He's calling you from a tattoo shop saying that there's a psychotic dude that down, and you're going to go pick him up, and this is the guy that you want to go out with? What the fuck's wrong with you, right? So she does it, though, against her, the advice of her friend. And and I get pneumonia, right? A lot of shit happened between them, but I get pneumonia. I'm on the house of my punk rock house on the couch where we spent a lot of time. And I get a knock at the door about like 2 weeks later. And I'd been sick the whole time, right? And I owe this guy $100 for this shotgun. So he comes back and he's like, hey, where the fuck have you been? You know, and I'm like, hey, you know, I've been sick. Everything was analog, right? We had cell phones. I had to walk. We didn't have cell phones.
Right,
so
right.
I had to walk to we didn't even have a house phone, right? I'm like, well, you know where I live, man. You know, I'm sick. You know, I don't have any money. I only have this little bit of tattoo equipment that I got from apprenticing and whatnot. And I left the shop because you're a psychotic asshole that like came in with guns and Molotov cocktails, literally. And he's well, you owe me $100. You got it? I said, no. And so he's like, give me the shotgun. So my homie at the time, who was on crack, went in the room and got the shotgun, very cracked like, and gave it to this guy. And so he cocked it and pointed at us and said, give me all your tattoo shit. Because, you owe me $100 for the shotgun. So I'm taking your shit and then we'll call it even. And so I did. I gave him everything that I apprenticed for at Shamrock. And he was sketchy because everybody was behind me. He had a 12 gauge that was loaded with, I knew what it was loaded with. It was loaded with buckshot. The trigger was, easily pulled for someone who's on speed.
Wow.
And so I just didn't want anybody to die. And we were all fucking tripping out, so we couldn't believe it was even happening. It was surreal. And so he took all my tattoo stuff, and then end of story is that he eventually ended up not doing too well in life. And I heard that the psycho guy got like put in someplace permanently.
Wow.
But I can't really guarantee and validate that.
That's
story.
a wild story, though. That is crazy.
And that happens in the tattoo industry. It's something that's known. Like you'll hear different versions of it because, different perspectives. But this did happen, and as a 21-year-old kid, it was pretty fucking formative. And it was it was kind of terrifying at the time, but it was kind of cool.
Yeah. It's like you were saying earlier, kind of that darkness to the tattoo studio is kind of what attracted you to the whole scene anyway. So.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't play around back then. People would break your hands.
Oh, yeah. You definitely had to respect where you were at and the people you were around for sure.
Oh, yeah, man. They weren't playing. I mean, I did a lot of stupid stuff that I just can't even believe that I got away with back then. And, again, I wouldn't do it a different way necessarily because I got away with it all and it was cool. Remember there was no cameras back then. So that whole Whitey Bulger thing where like if nobody sees it, it didn't happen was absolutely the way that it was back then. And so thank God that there was there wasn't a camera on every pole because there's no way we could have got away with that stuff the way. I mean, it was just it was a cool time. It was a really cool time. And, when I see Tarantino movies, it really, he really always, not to get into film, but he depicts that time so well with just the way that it was. And it was unbridled. And, if you didn't see it, it didn't happen kind of thing. It was kind of awesome. Yeah. So, I got a chance to live through that. Didn't die.
Yeah, I love hearing those stories for sure. That's a cool one. I like that. I'm actually gonna do a spinoff on my podcast where I'm gonna get way more into the history of tattooing because recently I've just been going down a lot of rabbit holes with like really, really old tattoo artists, like from the 40s and 50s eras. And I just kind of really want to start. I feel like as we're going through time, we're just losing more and more of that history of the industry.
Yeah.
And I really want to make sure that if I have a platform that I can use it to kind of preserve some of that. And I know there are other people out there doing it, but I really want to get into some of the nitty gritty stuff and do some interviews with some people that don't get spoken to a lot. Like, Bob Vessels, who you spoke about. I don't even know that. I'll bet you there aren't too many people in the industry today that even know that name, right? Like, yeah. So I think it's important to talk about some people like that and kind of what the history of tattooing really was.
You talk to the people now too, which would be interesting, their perspective, because like Mike Brown's son works up in Vatican, right? And I've met him over the years. He's a good person, and he would have some really interesting, because you can't talk to Mike Brown, right, unless you have a medium. So, but his son might be cool, and then maybe you can get into some of the people that were around that are older or people that kind of apprenticed during that period of time when I did, because you'll have, like Tom Tilden would be a great example. I think, also Mikey and Tommy Montoya, I mean, they're my age, a couple of years younger than me. Like, for instance, they would be great to talk to too, because they've been in the industry for a long time. They've made great impacts over the years in their own personal ways. The Montoyas, and I tattooed both of them. I gave them their first tattoos in my living room on Riverside Drive. I'd only been out of that studio for a short time, and I like I mentioned, I met my girl that would be my wife, Carla, and we were living together in the valley, and so I was tattooing out of our kitchen, and Mikey and Tommy had hit me up, because they used to come see my punk band play, and they were like, "Look, we really want a tattoo, and can you teach us? Can you apprentice us?" And I'm like, "Fuck, I truthfully only just know what I learned from this experience that I had at Shamrock 6 months ago, 7 months ago, less than a year ago, so I don't really know that I'm worthy of teaching you. But what I will do, I'll tell you everything that I learned from them, and I'll tell you everything about making needles that you want to know. And I'll tattoo you. And that's probably the best I can do because I don't really feel comfortable like apprenticing you. I don't know shit. And so they were cool with that. And so I tattooed them, and I told them what I knew. And they were eternally grateful. Like they're always thanking me when I see them. And we've been friends ever since. It's been like, 30 years? I don't know. Something like that. All these people, Tom Tilden, Mikey and Tommy Montoya. There's a number of people that I'm not really registering right now, but they're all from that era. And, we kind of know each other as associates.
Yeah. And then for the record, the story you told about meeting your wife and her picking you up at the tattoo studio. I think that's the way any good love story kind of starts anyways, right?
Mm-hmm. This one certainly did. Look, they came in with, I wasn't even a part of that whole scene. Like it was a whole scene that I wasn't experienced. Like it was, I don't know if you've ever seen that film Valley Girl, but it was very much that in a kind of metaphorical sense too, because it was the punker guy, the slim punk rock guy with spiky hair that thought he was the most subculture fucking dude ever, right? And was just the edgiest edgy because, you're 2021, you think you're the edgiest. At least I did. And then I met this girl with a pager who at the time, it seemed like only doctors had that if you were a brain surgeon or something. But, she had a pager because she was a working dancer professionally. And she was doing jobs and she was in the commercial industry. So, she really had her shit together. I lived on a couch in a punk rock house. So it was straight up like, her friends meeting my friends. My friends were bush diving and doing, drinking PBR and were dog patch winos and stuff. Not something I was, but the group that I hung out with. And so it was definitely clash of the cultures back then. And it was funny because when in hindsight, I thought we were so edgy and, you guys will never really quite understand it and whatnot. And to a certain degree, it was a little bit like that. But it was really that they had their shit together more than we did.
Yeah.
And, it was cool to have nothing, but that's just how it was, And then, of course, it was their friends were like, "You're crazy for dating fucking people and going to this punk rock house. We never hang out in this kind of environment. We have friends that are in shows on TV and stuff like that, and we're friends with the Zappas and this kind of a thing. You know what I mean? It was like this kind of." Other cool stuff about Shamrock about that time to time musicking was Eric from what came in early on with his Tommy Boy tape and was like, "Hey man, I got this new band and we have this new single coming out and the single's called Jump Around and I want you to hear this tape, Mark. It's cool because Mark used to tattoo Eric all the time, man, and and that was like the very first House of Pain shit, so this was like, House of Pain, whatever that album probably came out in like 92 or something. I don't know. Somewhere around that time. But yeah, he would come in and, we were listening to that on demo tape back before it even came out. And we were like, wow, that's just fucking cool. And me being into punk rock at that time, the only hip hop that I could really relate to was the early hip hop that, that came out of New York that was like Public Enemy. And actually that's not true because at that time also, just prior to that, NWA came out, and that was the hardest shit that I had heard when it came out. I was straight into punk and metal, but it fucking blew my mind. I had never heard anybody saying shit like that at all. And I was still living in Huntington at the time. This is kind of leading up to the hip hop aspect of things. So, out of Shamrock came a lot of interesting things. There's a lot of other people that I haven't even mentioned that would pop by all the time. Like Leif Garrett, when he, after he was successful, but before he was whatever he is now, just living. I remember he came in all drugged out and tripping, and he broke the shamrock on the wall, the neon shamrock.
Oh,
he knocked
shit.
it off in like an accidental frenzy. He was fucking around, and it was like just Oh, like, you know, that silence
Yeah.
fell on the shop. Like it was a cardinal sin. And he was like shamed for doing that. It was like, oh, you know what I mean? You can imagine Shamrock Tattoo, Irish, Mark Mahoney. You know, you come in, you break the thing that says Shamrock, and it's a and you've just done the. I mean, shit, man. You know, you're condemned to hell for
Yeah,
sure.
that's some bad karma.
Anyway, so it was just an interesting time. So it was very Valley Girl. I did meet my wife there. You know, so I got my tattoo career and my artistic career out of that. Music kind of, like I was saying, kind of started off there and kind of bustled up. And like I was saying with House of Pain, I thought this was really old school hip hop. I'm like, wow, this sounds pretty fucking cool. You know, because a lot of stuff that was going on right there, I wasn't really
Sure.
relating to. But this sounds, and it has big, big, big 808 beats. I'm like, this is cool. They're catchy hooks. They wrote good choruses, and there's dope 808. It reminds me of like Bomb Squad stuff from like Public Enemy. I can relate to this stuff
Yeah.
I'm in. You know, certain music
Yeah,
hits you
yeah.
like that, and genres. You know, but at that time, punk rock was kind of like on a kind of a downslide, and there was nobody saying anything as hard as NWA and Public Enemy at that
Right.
particular
From a
time.
political standpoint, for sure. Yeah.
Just in terms, yeah, from a political standpoint, and just what they were saying and how they were saying it. You know what I'm saying? Like it kind of I believe that, even though it was I believed it especially, but I know part of it was shtick. But it was it came out harder, and it came out as real as things that I think are super real. So, for instance, when I first heard the decline of Western civilization back in the day, and I heard like the circle jerks for the first time, or this kind of, or the adolescents for the first time, these kind of things. When I heard Johnny Cash for the first time, these things that were really instrumental. It was we used it was punk for, and we'll just use that term. It was because nothing was like that. They were saying what they wanted to say. Yeah, like when I heard Waylon Jennings for the first time, and the shit
Yeah.
that he was saying, I'm like, that's fucking punk. You guys are super punk, man. Before punk was even a thing. And so that's why when I got into that early hip hop that was kind of New York, and it got a little harder. It was, you know, it wasn't so dancey and stuff. I was completely blown away. I'm like, man, this is heavy. This is some heavy shit. You know, I heard other things that came later that seemed really heavy. When I heard Blood, Guts, and Pussy from the Dwarves for the first time, it was at the same time that I was listening to the Black Crowes for the first time and early Nirvana, like Sliver. And I was like, wow, these guys are fucking gnarly, like
Yeah.
NWA. And ironically, you know, Blag's been a friend for a long time, and I booked tours and toured with them. But they were actually listening when they were fucking recording Blood, Guts, and Pussy. They were listening to Straight Outta Compton.
Really.
Yeah, that only
Yeah,
validates what
yeah.
I'm saying.
It's interesting because I think a lot of people really don't give enough credit into the genre crossovers in music the way that they should. You know, like everybody likes to draw these lines in the sand, and they're just like, oh, hip hop, or oh, rock, or oh, country, or whatever the genre is. They don't realize how much influence each one of those genres has on one another. So it's interesting to hear you talking about that.
I can't agree with you more. You know, no, I think you're absolutely right. That's a great observation. And you know, the cool thing nowadays, that's exactly what's happened though. It's gotten it musically and with tattooing, with everything, right? You know, because you have so much of it, and it's been happening for so many decades, and there's been, there's so many generations involved, and things that you wouldn't believe are classic rock are classic rock now. And what's happened, music is this amalgamation, just like tattooing and art and everything. Everything's crossed over, and you know, you have bands that are fusing metal, punk rock, hip hop, rap, trap, country, everything, and you have artists that are doing these multi-genre albums, and or it's just there's so many people that love all things that it's no longer this stiff and rigid situation that it used to be. And I think when you're a younger person, I mean, I can speak for myself. I had a stronger ideology about what I would and wouldn't listen to, and it mattered a little more to me what other people thought in terms of, like, I would say, hey, yeah, I'm listening to ABBA, and then I'm going to listen to the Misfits, and they'd be like, "You're listening to ABBA," and I'd be like, and when I was younger, that would make an impact on me. But you get a little older, and you're like, hey, they wrote dope hooks, and they're the best, some of the best pop songs that you'll ever hear. So yeah, I listened to ABBA, Slayer, the Misfits, and Waylon Jennings in a row, and Prince, and whatever, and Parliament
Yeah.
and Funkadelic. And then I'll listen to Mozart, and I'll listen to whatever I want to, and not be
That's the
ashamed
way it
about
should
it.
be. I think it's funny, like, because now you see it a lot more now than what you used to. But I think back to like when Aerosmith did the song with Run DMC. That was kind of like the first time one of the first times something like that ever happened, like on the mainstream. You know what I mean? Like Walk This Way
Yeah,
with Run
yeah,
DMC, but nowadays it's weird to me because I don't know if you're a fan of Post Malone or Machine Gun Kelly now today, but like the general public tends to freak out when these artists want to like MGK's been a hip hop guy for so long. Now all of a sudden he wants to do a punk rock song, or now he wants to do a pop song or whatever, and people just freak out. Or if Beyonce does a country music song, or it's just like it's
you're gonna have that demo. To your point, you're right. I mean, there's a certain demographic of anybody's audience, whether you're an artist or a musical artist or whatever. As an artist, when you're changing direction for whatever reason, like let's just say because you want to, because you just want to do something a little different, and you don't want to continue the same fucking path because you're an artist. It feels good, right? And you're going to have people that are always going to be up against that, saying that I really liked what you did previously, and I'm not so into this new stuff. And then conversely, you'll have people that say, "Hey, I'm really glad you tried this stuff." You just can't. You got to listen to yourself more than you got to listen to other people. I mean, you can take into consideration people's thoughts on it, and whatnot, but only with a grain of salt. And it's really you got to listen to your inner voice if you've got one, and that'll really tell you what you should and shouldn't be doing. But if you let other people dictate what it is in the directions that you're going to go, you're just not going to
right,
go anywhere or
right,
anywhere fun. You know,
right. Well, since we're on the subject of
I
music
get.
now, let's talk about your musical interest, because you've done a lot in music. You still do a lot in music. You're tied to the Punk Rock Museum. So how does that how does that whole how does that all come together in your tattooing life? And when does that all start to really kind of take a predominant point in your life? And when how does that balance out? How did you find that to work out? Where were you able to mesh your love for music and your love for art and tattooing, and how have you been able to kind of morph that into a multifaceted, I don't know if you call it a career or just life passion? How do you
Yeah,
mesh those two worlds?
yeah, it's a career. I mean, again, it came from the desire not to have to do something that was not fun. I think to jump back again, and we'll get into music. Let me just take a note so that I know where I don't lose place here. So it's music. We got into it. But jumping back to being a kid, so before I moved to Los Angeles, I lived on the East Coast for a bit, and before I moved to Huntington Beach. And I had family on my mom's side of the family is English and American Indian. My dad's side is full blood Hawaiian, and so this is the English American Indian side of the family. And when I was living on the East Coast, my mom being a single mom, she had to go to medical school, and so she was working as well as doing that. So I'd spend summers with my uncle, who recently passed away, and my aunt, and they were teaching me work ethics, at like 4, 5, 6, 7. It's like in the 70s, and they were living in like outside of Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which was very country back then, and they would have me kind of work on their. It wasn't a farm, but they had a bunch of animals and they had horses and stuff, so you learned how to deal with animals and what this kind of thing. Now, I had when I was a kid, I had to get over a few things. I had some pretty strong allergies, and so I wasn't actually able to be around the horses and stuff back then as much as I can now. I've developed past that, but just so you know, when I was growing up, I had to overcome massive allergies, massive asthma, which I also overcome mostly, speech impediment, which was I couldn't say R's, and then some sort of like a psychological trip where I had to kind of learn social cues that
Sure.
didn't come as naturally, right? So I had all those things going on as a little kid. It's always hard being a kid, anyways. But when you have extra things to overcome, it kind of sucks. So, but anyways, that lends to learning how to deal with farm animals and learning your responsibility. My uncle every morning he had an asphalting company, and he just did like industrial and commercial asphalting, filling potholes, driveways, tracks, whatever. And he would take me and my cousin out, and we had to work with him in the fucking New Jersey sun in the summertime while I was on vacation from school. We get up at 5 a.m. every day and work till about 3 p.m. every day, and then go to the elk club. And then he would drink beers, and we'd play darts, and he'd eat pretzels. But we were shoveling, and the asphalt's super hot, smells like shit. First time I ever, drank gas inadvertently, trying to siphon it. First time I used a jackhammer. All that lended to not wanting to fucking do anything like that for
Right.
which is why I got into art. And I'm like, I got to keep drawing because this is not what I want to do, And that's where it kind of so you understand my background. So then jumping forward, I was super shy and really was as much as I loved to sing, I was very apprehensive about like self-confidence and like self-worth as a kid because I was overcoming all of those maladies. And so I didn't really have the courage to do that. Although I like to sing a lot and I continue to draw nonstop. And that's where I put all my time into was not getting to know people, but just drawing and being into stuff like that, and kind of learning about my American Indian and especially my Hawaiian culture as a young person.
The business of tattooing is brought to you by Electrum Supply, the industry leader in high-quality tattoo supplies designed by artists for artists. Whether you need premium stencil products, top-tier cartridges, or game-changing aftercare, Electrum has you covered with innovative, artist-tested solutions you can trust. Want to elevate your work? Head over to electrumsupply.com and stock up on the best gear in the business. And because you're a listener of the business of tattooing, use code podcast10 at checkout for 10% off your next order. Stay sharp, stay stocked, and stay ahead with Electrum Supply.
And then, man, there's a certain point where I got those punk albums as a kid. And my mom was always very into music. We would listen to Supremes all the time on the East Coast when we were living there, people that babysat me. All the Motown, I got way into Motown, Nina Simone, and all those kind of things. And that whole generation of Detroit music. And then I had some cool people in my life that were like maybe the kids of people that I would visit, or friends of my mom, kids of my mom's friends who were older. Then they got me into a bunch of other cool stuff, like all the '70s music that was kind of coming out, and whatnot. I remember Manfred Mann's Earth Band, the cover that they did, that Bruce Springsteen wrote of "Blinded by the Light." That was a popular song when I was like a real little kid. And I remember really loving that. When you're a kid, you don't know why you like things, but that was an inspirationally cool song, And then suddenly, when I finally moved to the West Coast from the East Coast, all of a sudden people turned me on to the Ramones and the Cramps right away, and continued to listen to all outlaw country, through that time. But I got the Rodney on the Rock Volume 1. And The Decline of Western Civilization. And at that time, a bunch of punk movies came out that supported that, like Another State of Mind and other films like that. A little bit later on, Return of the Living Dead came out that had one of the best soundtracks. And it was again, one of these, a very formative film in terms of like wanting to be like somewhat the people in the film, and it represented my era of punk rock and music to a really strong degree with the soundtrack. and got me really into film. Because when I was a kid, I wanted to be a special effects artist like Rick Baker
Okay.
or Rod Bottin.
Yeah, I can
Looked into
see that.
doing that actually. They just they pushed me away from doing it because they said you can do it at 16. You can come in next year if you want to do it, but you have to dedicate your entire life to this exclusively if you want to do this for a living. And I think that deterred me as a kid. You know, another jumping back again, another really formative reason that I got into art too and was really cool. I was really supportive. Is that when I would go to the on the East Coast, when I'd go visit my grandpa in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. At that time, Norman Rockwell's house was in his
Oh
town
wow.
right there, and the Rockwell Museum at that time, you could there was just like stanchions with velvet ropes in front of the paintings. So I mean, you could get up. This is like the mid '70s, so you could get up as close as you wanted to these Norman Rockwell paintings and look at all the brushstrokes and stuff, and then step back. And that's all I had to do in Great Barrington, Mass, in the summertime, besides getting lost in the woods and whatever else you do, with no cell phones. So I would go and just be enthralled with Great Barrington, with Norman Rockwell's art, and he was one of the very first inspirations for me to draw and to paint. I know you can't see it in my art really, probably much, but he was certainly a huge inspiration, as well as Frank Frazetta and Boris
Okay.
Vallejo. And then later on, I learned about Bernie Wrightson, and then I jumped back and I learned about Jack Kirby and everybody that came out of there, and all the Mad Magazine artists, and like all of that stuff very much instrumentally created the style that I not only tattoo but especially what I draw today. Like all that stuff kind of culminated into what made me happy, the
Yeah.
artist that I am. But hearing all that punk rock, that changed my directive. And I'm like, now I want to have confidence. So I started doing backyard parties in Huntington Beach and in LA as a kid, and doing cover songs, doing Sex Pistols songs, or, doing an Agent Orange song, or like, picking like a Johnny Cash song and speeding it up and this kind of a thing. And, from about like 18 to about 35, I really focused on music. And there was a time there when, in punk rock, I didn't think we had any chance of having a career, although I really tried hard to have one. And even when everybody blew up in the early 2000s and went platinum, we weren't doing that kind of punk rock. I was always inspired by bands that mostly didn't have much
Sure, sure.
commercial success. And oddly, but I always just liked that kind of thing. So I probably emulated that quite a bit. I was a huge Lux fan, Iggy Pop fan, like Stiv Bators. These were the performers that I wanted to be like. Um, they're all very iconic, but I don't, and I wouldn't give it up. But it's not like I was admiring and looking to be people that were like multimillionaires and extremely successful. And I
Yeah.
never looked at it that way. But in hindsight, that's really the truth. I mean, fucking, see, it's like a crime that like a band like Monster Magnet wouldn't be more popular today. And they're one of my favorite like
Yeah.
rock bands, because they pull from Jack Kirby comics and comic book lyrics kind of thing, but they're kind of like Hawkwind, Lemmy's first band, but with kind of Sabbath tones with a spacey trip. They almost have that desert scene,
Yeah.
but like in space, like Kaya's space. But they're like fucking. Not everybody knows who they are. And maybe people know like one song. I'm always a huge Misfits fan. I just love that dark, iconic kind of vibe. And until recently, they didn't make any money. The Cramps, legendary. But if you nowadays, I would say more people know about them because of Google Muck being on the
Yeah, yeah,
Wednesday
yeah.
show, right? But prior to just like last year or 2 years ago, you could ask like 10 people on the street who the Cramps were, and like one might tell you, I know who they are. And so that's the kind of music I made too. So even through the 2000s when punk rock was actually making millions and millions of dollars, um, I was not. We were having fun. We had lots of cool independent labels. We got to go to Europe. We played with lots of cool bands. We toured. We did lots of really fun stuff. and I did a lot of it myself. Like it was very self
Right.
motivated. Um, and I booked for Tang Records for about a year and a half, 2 years. So I booked a bunch of tours for punk bands. I mostly set up all of our shows initially because out of necessity. You know, back then it was book your own fucking life. And you had Flipside as a Bible, and you had Maximum
Yeah.
Rock and Roll as a Bible. And I had Thrasher as a Bible back then. So to try to get in and on and the cover of and be a part of any of those were about like the extent of success, you know? And I mean, I always tried to get us money and always tried to get us as much as we possibly could. And again, we did a lot better than some acts and a lot worse than others over the years in Los Angeles with the different bands that I did. But we were lucky because we always had people that would like, when I look back, like you never got on majors, but we always had really cool independence. Like, I guess I could always talk people into and with not just talk, but through action, through music, through tenacity, through excitement, through like just this is going to be great kind of vibe, positivity. I was always able to get people to support the things that I was doing, uh, to some degree, right? I was never left like with only my own devices. And I have to be very grateful for all of those people who stepped up and put whatever amount of money they had behind whatever I was doing because wasn't really a good
Right. Right.
investment. I mean, in terms of like,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
ROI, but they believed in it at the time, and so did we. And I think that's really cool. Later on, I got into writing a little bit more like dark alternative country, rockabilly stuff that I thought might be possibly more accessible to other people. In hindsight, I can see where it may not have been because I still pulled from all of those same kind of influences, but just amalgamated it into a more of a maybe semi more digestible, but still with a lot of the same fervor. So I don't know. There was a certain point, buddy, where I decided at about 35, I knew that if I'm not going to make an undisclosed amount of money a year doing this, then there's only so much effort I can put towards music versus art and the other things that I need to be a responsible adult and
Yeah.
make my wife happy and have some real the thing was I learned that I can promote myself as a tattoo artist the way that I promoted a band, and that's what I did early on. And back then it worked really well because not a lot of artists were doing that. So I would book dates and go out with friends like on the road, and I could actually book it as like tour dates. I mean, you see that happening all the time now. Artists are going, "Hey, my tour dates are this," and they're out there doing expo after expo, and it is kind of tour dates, a tour one. But a long time ago when I first started that, there wasn't many artists doing that would make like a flyer and they would use their own image and their own art. And it was oversized. And then on the back would have like a list of all the shit that they were doing. And I was always ambitious trying to get into uh, not do tattoo expos and try to do horror and creepier stuff that I wanted to do. And so I found that like if I go to the demographic that I'm into, then rather than fighting for a 16th of what the Tattoo Expo has to offer in terms of a demographic that's into my art, I can go to a place where 99% of the people would probably be into it if they trust me. And I can, I can build myself that way without having to, expend all of this energy and trying to hunt down this
Sure.
very small percentage of people that might like what I'm into drawing and into creating for them. And so that's what I did, like both in music and tattooing and everything that I do now. It's all about not only reinventing yourself and having a strong directive, but it's about creating opportunities for yourself and then inadvertently or actually directly creating opportunities for others. So a lot of what I've done over the last 25 years is make opportunities for other people to get exposure and have money because not only does it benefit me, it
Sure.
benefits them. So, you create opportunities for yourself and so that you don't have to rely exclusively on other
Right.
people
Right.
giving you things because it's never.
So how did your tattooing career morph into, your love for Halloween and Halloween tattoos and what inspired you to open that shop and kind of make that your identity? How did that just
Well, when I think back, I realized in the Mark Mahoney days, I had to in the Shamrock days. You got to have some sort of an identity. Even then, I realized, subconsciously that one of the things that really that stood out about Bob back then, Bob Vessels, and what stood out about Mark Mahoney and some of the other people that I met in the industry is that they had extremely strong personalities, and that was part of what was the draw in getting clients. I mean, you do want to be a good artist, but bedside manner is very important, and it's very important to have the people that you tattoo actually like spending time with you. And there's things that you can do to make that a reality, and I learned a lot of that back then from those guys. And so one of the first cards I had, it said fly tattoos, and I had this art book that broke down the anatomy of a fly and how to draw it, and I put that on my card. And this is before I even thought about being Halloween tattoos. It said fly tattoos, and that was me like a couple months after I was still apprenticing. I hadn't even done the second ink slinger's ball yet. But soon after that, I'm like, well, what? I was born in October. I've always drawn monsters. My initials are SPK. As a kid, I always thought that was spooky, right? I remember I even had that put on a belt when I was about 5 years old. I drew. It was the neatest thing. I know I'm jumping all over the place, but we'll get back to it about the Halloween thing. But this goes to show. I was about five. Let's see. At 3 years old, I took my very first picture in the skeleton costume that I got from Kmart, and it was Ben Cooper skeleton costume. And I had both my jack-o'-lanterns next to me, and one with the jack-o'-lantern pail. And underneath that mask at 3 years old in Costa Mesa by that fireplace, I was making this face. And that's what I thought that I was terrifying. And, this little skull plastic thing on. But in that picture, I recall looking out from that mask and being like, I am scaring fucking people to death right now with the Wolfman thing. And so, that kind of came naturally, right? And then later on, my mom was cool. We went to this lady, and she said, I can put all of your drawings on a belt. And I said, even though they're monsters, you can put them on a belt. And she said, yeah, absolutely. I'll do it, with leather work by hand. Someplace in like Topanga Canyon, I think. So I drew out on the strip all the monsters that I wanted to have on my belt. I was 5, and she did that, and she put them all in there. They look just like my drawings. I mean, I still have it, and I was so proud. I was so proud to wear that belt, as I recall. And it was just such a cool thing. So jump forward, Halloween tattoos was available. Who would have thought? And so I jumped on that shit right away. And part of my success, a great deal of my success, was meeting Carla, the woman who would be my wife, fairly early on in my life. I mean, I think that for a lot of people, that could be the case. And when I look back, that was a very, very important and pivotal time for me. And although, like any relationship, especially one that goes back as far as that, she was part of the reason. The reason I'm saying that is she's part of the reason helped me get organized. Like, hey, you got to make this your LLC. You got to get Halloween. Let's lock that shit in. Let's get all the stuff that relates to that stuff. As we went along and as we went out of an analog era and into the era that we're in now, which is pretty fast and hyperbolic. She's been helpful along the way with like IT understanding and all these kind of things. You develop as an individual from this analog era into something where I'm surprised that I have the understanding that I do, even though it's limited sometimes. And so all of that culminated into the idea that, hey, just embrace who you are, push out there who you are, whatever it is, and with tenacity and follow through. And the most important thing is consistency, right? Consistency and quality to the best of your ability. You can totally succeed, but you need a strong brand. And so, loving horror, loving sci-fi. The very first movie I ever saw, my mom took me to in Costa Mesa. I was 5 years old. The very first horror movie, and I saw The Creature from the Black Lagoon in 3D with the legend of Bigfoot. Yeah. Just like he was 70s version of what James did earlier. The movie theater, right? That changed my fucking life. So it was so natural for me just to say Halloween tattoos, focus on the way that I want to do things. Even my music was always mostly had like kind of a dark edge to it. Everything, I think what it is that you just try to embrace every aspect of who you are truthfully, and all those things will refine as you get older and you do stuff. Your true essence really doesn't. And so if you're able to find that fairly early and capitalize on it, you're going to live a very like fulfilling and mostly fun life if you've been given the opportunity to do so. Like if you're afforded that because of your position in the universe, it's really great. And I'm very grateful, and I've been very, very lucky to have the opportunities and the people in my life that love me so much. With my mom being supportive all the way back. I wouldn't be the person I am today without all of the people that I just talked about, my brother, my dad, the people that have supported me, the friends, the different brands that have been my sponsors, and even in tattooing that have been with me for, like, in some cases, almost 2 full decades. These are all the people that have made me what I am today. And without them, I wouldn't be at all who I am. They definitely, I can't thank everybody enough for affording me this really, really generous
I think that's
life.
incredible. It seems to be a pretty reciprocal thing in your life, for sure, from my observations. I mean, I think it's cool to hear you acknowledge all of that and all of those people, but also I think it's cool to see the impact that you have on them as well. I think you do a lot to enhance people that you have relationships with. So I think that's cool. It's a full.
I do. I will absolutely do that. And you can't. The thing about that is it's an interesting lesson too. You have to do things because you wanna. You do, though. As I've gotten older, I have refined who I will help and who I won't. I really went into things with, like, just help everybody. Everybody deserves knowledge if they show some sort of interest. And to a certain degree, that's a little bit true. You got to refine things so that you don't get drained, though. And you also have to refine things because everybody actually doesn't deserve that knowledge.
Right.
I guess the point being is that with a little bit of confidence and tenacity, and I think, again, what I'm learning these days, more importantly, is consistency. All the people around me are very consistent. And you learn who you should help and who you shouldn't help. Sometimes I've learned recently, too, that you can, people coming out of your life, things begin and they end. Things are always going to end. Good times will always end. Bad things will end too. But you have to be thoughtful about who you let into your life, how much you let them into your life, and you have to be thoughtful and diligent about how people treat you through that. People oftentimes take advantage of your good nature. And a lot of times it's inadvertent. Sometimes it's definitely on purpose, but sometimes, you're just there so often for people and you're so consistent that they just expect that you always will be there. And sometimes you have to cut those fucking people right off.
Yeah.
And you do.
It's good to hear you say that. It's good to hear you say that. I feel like everybody needs to be reminded of that every once in a while. I've definitely had to learn some hard lessons that way, for sure, throughout my course. Not just in tattooing, but just in life in general. I mean, that's you're gonna always have those kind of people that want to drain your energy.
People change.
Yeah, people.
I mean, look, there's that thing that says people don't change, and there's a certain truth to that. But people do change too. And when they go through different parts of their existence, whatever's happened to them, it's the thing is, it's like your expectations are the bigger problem usually, and I have to learn that, a lot of times over and over again. What you expect from people and what they offer you are two separate things, and I'm pretty harsh about that. And I expect people to be harsh with me. I've done things in the past that didn't sit well with people, and they've written me off, and I've deserved that, And so, and that's a good lesson to you. Don't fuck around. And it's really important that you create lines in the sand for yourself too, on a business level, on a personal level, and know that you got to have a strong ideology, and that you got to stand your ground oftentimes. And a lot of times, at least in my experience, is that even when there's a misunderstanding, in time, things work their way out. And I usually go with my gut feeling now, and I will apologize later if I'm wrong, versus being subjected to like the inadequacies and the bullshit that might occur. Like I'm going to read into it before, and I'll speak out my mind, and I try to cut that bullshit out real quick now, because
Right.
I offer a lot as a friend, a companion, and as someone who's creating events. I give a lot, and if I expected that same from everybody, I would be every day disappointed.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Every day I'd be disappointed.
Absolutely.
You got to limit your expectations of other people, and but what sometimes it's reciprocated. It's cool. I don't do it for reciprocation all the time, but sometimes it's nice to be acknowledged for the opportunities that you've given other people for so many decades. And that's really what you get sometimes.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that.
Maybe that's all.
I feel that, man. Well, let's talk about the good
Feeling
karma,
like
right?
way.
So like let's talk about what's going on in life today. You got you're paired up with James over there and some other people behind the scenes. You've got Raven's Nest that you're just getting off the ground. But even before that, you've been doing some stuff with Buffalo Chip for a while now, and some charity stuff. So let's talk a little bit about that and the passion behind that, and kind of what inspired you to start that whole thing, and kind of where you're taking it today, and what's going on.
Okay, well, to start with, Raven's Next Productions is a new production company that James and my wife Carla, myself, our partner Isaac, and Sarah. That's that Bing that we created. It was initially I wanted to do. I started a previous company with a different partner that just didn't work out exactly, and but it started off as mobile tattooing for events, because I've got, like, over the years in music and art and tattooing and whatnot, I've just gotten to know a lot of promoters and bands and artists, and production companies, all this kind of stuff. My wife and I have been in the entertainment industry for years. My wife is deeply in the entertainment industry. We'll have to talk a little bit more about that later, but as a result, I have a lot of interesting connections that you don't just utilize loosely and flagrantly, because you know how connections are. You got to be cool with them. You only pull that card when it's really necessary. So we started this mobile tattoo thing because we were seeing all these events that didn't have mobile tattooing. I know there's a lot of people out there doing it, but we had some different ways of doing it with all my different sponsors and the different things. And um, so we started that idea, and that didn't pan out. And so I wanted to continue doing that concept, but on a bigger scale. So I got with the team that I'm with now. And that's our ultimate goal, is we're building out this mobile unit that we can then get these contracts for, and we'll have a real good time with that. And that's just part of what Raven's Nest Productions will be doing. But the difference is, again, we have a lot of great sponsors, and we have the tattoo industry behind us, which is a beautiful thing that not everybody has. In addition to that, we want to get into creating our own events where tattooing is just a part of it. So our Genesis event for Raven's Nest Productions is creating a nationally marketed tattoo contest with many of the major brands, and they're in a non-competitive kind of forum. So everybody's even playing field. Everybody's cool with each other, and we got Mario Barth and Intens involved, and a number of other really amazing brands, Derb and True Tattoo, and Inkies and Shaun, and the list goes on. We can get into that later even further. But we needed some sort of an event that would be a way to like amalgamate all of these different personalities and brands into one situation, so that we were working with them and we got a feel for each other, so then we can go on and continue on with these other ideas that I spoke about. And so the Buffalo Chip was something that started 15 years ago, and it was that demographic I was very enamored by, although I'm not a motorcycle rider. I never really got into riding motorcycles because truthfully, I didn't want to fuck myself up. And so, being an artist, but I like that demographic. And again, coming from a military background, there's a lot of that out there. And so in researching in the, with waving the flag of creating your own opportunities, right? I had a few tattoo programs that I was running in the horror community, but I wanted not horror, but horror community. And so I wanted to get into the motorcycle community. So this is how we're getting to this event that we're doing on August 3rd at the Buffalo Chip at the Crossroads, which is the tattoo contest, chipping in. So the biggest campground and concert venue in South Dakota during the motorcycle rally is the Buffalo Chip. And it doesn't take much research to figure that out. So I went out there. I didn't know how to get a hold of anybody. So what I did one year, because this is what you do in analog times, 16 years ago, 16 years now, I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to cold call that place. They have a shit for a tattoo program. I want to be the guy that does the tattoo program there. I've got enough sponsors under my belt, and I think I have enough artists that would trust me to put this together and bring them out there. Was my mentality. So I went out to Sturgis one year and looked at what downtown was all about and whatnot, and never even went by the Buffalo Chip. And the reason I didn't was, in a nutshell, the person I was going to go out there with and like split the cost of the whole thing, like flaked on me the day of the trip. They just never showed up at the airport. And I was on like very little sleep because we played a sold out show in LA at the Key Club the night before. And so I went out there, and because that dude didn't show up and everything fell in my lap and every expense was on my fucking deal, I didn't expect that. I was super bummed out. And I went fishing for 2.5 days and just went downtown and whatnot and didn't think that I was going to get shit done. The next October, and I gave up on that, but I didn't give up on the idea of getting a program at the Buffalo Chip. But I just went home with nothing successful except for catching trout. And so that following October, I was doing a spot in a booth with Vintage Tattoo at Mario Bar's Expo in Las Vegas. And Greg Smith, the right-hand man of the owner of the Buffalo Chip, who would become one of my closest true friends and brothers, came up to the booth because he was there for Bike Week and it was dead. And he had been, ironically, in the search for someone to create a comprehensive, real tattoo program for the Buffalo Chip because he believed in his heart that that's what was missing from the situation out there. They try to make an adult Disneyland where the only reason you have to leave the chip is to go for a motorcycle ride. Otherwise, you got everything. You don't have to leave that location. Okay. You don't have to leave the site. And so, he knew that he had a shit program. So when he came up with the Buffalo Chip hat on, I said, oh, hey, man. And I told him that loose story of what I just told you. And he goes, well, ironically, I'm looking for someone to do this. And we had that "are you full of shit" moment, which we both weren't. And it was great. It was just the strangest thing. Like less than a year later, I had the opportunity to work with the Buffalo Chip just from putting it out there in the universe.
Yeah, and the stars just aligned. Isn't that crazy?
The stars aligned, right? So we did the very first thing we did with them was this thing called Sturgis on the Road. They were going to try to take the Buffalo Chip on the road and go to all these different cities and basically bring like live music and what happens at the Buffalo Chip and in Sturgis, just around the country. And we were on the very first one, and it was a shit show. Like there was a number of reasons. It was act of God stuff. It rained harder than it ever had in Pennsylvania and Harrisburg that weekend. And it was just a number of things. The production was a shit show. But my group of tattoo artists, in spite of it being something that they never pursued, we saved the event because it was raining so hard in Harrisburg during Sturgis on the Road the first time we were working with the Buffalo Chip that the people that were there were actually stuck in the hangar. They couldn't even leave. And when they left the hangar, there was like in some places 3 feet of water.
Wow.
It's funny. And so anyways, we tattooed in the hangar and the rain was coming down so hard that it was actually, it was competing with the sound of like Foreigner. Like some like foreigner or something, something like that. One of those 70s rock bands were playing it, but the rain was almost louder than them. Anyways, we saved that event, and we made people happy, and the Buffalo Chips saw that. The following year, I did my very first tattoo cafe deal, which was fucking hard, and it wasn't that good. I'll be honest with you. First year stuff out there, I didn't know the scope. Brought too many artists out there. Didn't have a number of things that I needed. It was definitely a spanking, but it didn't stop me from continuing. Like, your failures are just reasons to continue.
Yeah.
So the next time you can do better. So now we're at 15 years later, and we're doing this tattoo contest at the Crossroads, the free area of the Buffalo Chip, on August 3rd, and we have Ricky Rackerman hosting it. We have Derb running the contest and being one of the judges. Mario Barth will be out there judging as well. We've got a Sailor Jerry person being out there. We have a couple of radio stations locally that are going to be supporting us, but we have a DJ from X Rock coming out there, and they've always been, K-Sky and X Rock have been always supportive of my tattoo programs. Thank you guys. Thank you, Kevin, and everybody, and Rambo. And we'll be seeing you soon. So they've always been cool. We have this really great contest, nationally marketed. Inked Magazine is going to help us market it, and we've had some conversations with them. So we're hoping that we work even more directly with them next year. They're going to come out and get a feel for what the Buffalo Chip's about this year, which I'm excited about. And we have Skin and Ink Magazine that's going to come out. Scott's been great with his team. And our discussion has been that they're going to embed with us for like 2.5 days and dedicate an issue to the tattoo program, the tattoo contest, and Sturgis as a whole. So we're going to kind of, very much like about famous them and really like immerse them in the whole experience. And if everything goes the way that we've been discussing, that should be really neat and very cool and a fun issue. So I hope that kind of comes together, and we're really lucky because we have, your company, Electrum, and a number of other companies working with us, Tat Soul, Inkies, Critical, like I said, Intens, and Bishop. And we have a certain amount of sponsors that are working with me and that have worked with me, as well as new ones like yourself, True, and Electrum on the tattoo contest side. And then we have a number of other sponsors, and some of the same overlap, that have been sponsoring the Tattoo Cafe for the last 15 years. And we always add to that too. Richie and Seth from Hustle Butter have always been so awesome and so supportive for so many years, and I can't tell you how important Shaun from Inkies, Shaun Hoy, has been in my life.
Yeah.
And Eternal Ink too. Tramp and Gina and Shaun Hoy, they were the first people that trusted me as an artist. So I got Eternal as my very first sponsor, like maybe almost 20 years ago, by just being at expos and just asking and trying to always showing up.
Yeah.
Showing up is half the battle. And there wasn't a lot of people sponsored back then like it is now. And then Inkies too, like they trusted me early on, because I was just doing stuff all the time and was promoting them like I was in a band or something.
Yeah.
And so it's because of all of them that we got what we have going today with, and we have all these brands that trust us, because it's kind of like, you get a couple people to support you, and then you have more people that will say, oh, well, they've been consistent and not full of shit for a while, and these companies support them. They seem credible. They're out there doing stuff. They're getting shit on social media. They do nice work. We want to be a part of that too, and that's just kind of the way things work. It's, again, I think the lesson from all of this is have a plan and be consistently as good as you can all the time. Consistency is key, and that will make people want to work with you, unless you're consistently shit, and then people will not want to work with you.
Right. Absolutely.
Or you consistently don't follow through.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like you can not succeed, and people will absolutely respect you still, unless you have a succession of failures constantly. then you're doing something wrong. But if they see you succeeding intermittently and you're trying different things, and they see you go back to the drawing board with integrity and start again, anybody who's done anything worthwhile will see, sees that you have integrity and the tenacity and the follow through to be somebody that could be respected and potentially work with, in some capacity.
Right. Absolutely. 100%.
So that's kind of in a nutshell what we're doing with Raven's Nest. I mean, we're really excited about this year. We're really, you guys go to ravensnestlive.com, go to the website, please purchase tickets for the tattoo contest. We have 9 categories. It's $15 in advance for the categories. On site, it's going to be $20 when you get on site for the first, second, and third. But the marketing campaign is kind of starting revving up now. We have a video out there. We're doing what we can, but you'll see it revving up over the next few weeks. So we have about 8 weeks until the event. And I'm very excited about everybody that's involved. And I know that you're going to be coming out. I think Tommy's coming out from Tommy's Tattoo Expo.
Yeah.
This is a good year because it's the 85th anniversary of Sturgis, as well as the 15-year anniversary of the tattoo program. So, it's a fucking great year to be a voyeur and be a part of Sturgis. It's not a great year to ride your motorcycle in Sturgis, unless you want to sit in a queue with a hot engine between your legs. It's a great year to be there. So I'm really, really excited about all of these people coming out. And, the Tattoo Cafe, man, the group of artists that I have are awesome. And, we've brought the standard of tattooing up in Sturgis highly. And I'm not going to say verbatim that I created this trend, but I will say that I absolutely helped create this trend, and that is bringing the top brands and products out to Sturgis, promoting that you're using them to the general public as well as the artists that are there downtown and at the various areas, and making it known that you're using the best brands and the best products, and that you can offer custom tattooing as well as flash tattooing at a level that is not what would be typically connotated as biker, old school biker, right. And just shit. Because the connotation of biker tattoos wasn't too far off from like prison tattoos in the regard that you're going to get something that's kind of mediocre. So you can get that really great custom art now and you have been able to, from the Tattoo Cafe, both shops on site of the Buffalo Chip for 15 years. We have the arena location, which is a pay to get in location. And that sits at 12 o'clock of the main stage in the arena of the Buffalo Chip, which is about 40,000 capacity roughly. And the main stage is at 12 o'clock. And then we have where the tattoo contest is going to be located, the free area of the Buffalo Chip at the front of the chip that competes with downtown. We have a one artist shop with one assistant there. And the cool thing about all this is that we've always maintained the highest standard of quality in terms of, artistic quality. We always try to pick the best artists. But also the health department calls us the gold standard in Sturgis because of the nature of all the brands that we use, the way that we do things, and how we offer things. And we are more expensive. We are. The arena is a little more expensive than you would get downtown, and even the Crossroads competes with downtown. But I would say that we, in some cases we're a little more expensive. But that's just because we offer quality,
right?
And we offer the best brands and the best products out there. So we offer competitive tattooing. It's what you would see across the board nationally, but we're not lowering our prices or anything like that because we know how good we are. We know what we offer, and quite honestly, you get what you pay for out there.
Right. Well, talk specifically about chipping in and what is chipping in and what are you raising money for, and let's get into some of that.
Well, cool. You mentioned previously that you're trying to keep the tradition and the older traditions as well as the knowledge passed on and continuing forward so that we don't lose it completely. Even though we're going to lose the physical souls, the knowledge and understanding shouldn't be lost. And one of the ways that you can do that is by supporting the Tattoo Heritage project. One of our board members, Kevin Royce Johnson of Raven's Nest, is also on the Tattoo Heritage Project board. Great guy, one of my best friends, and what a great ally Kevin Royce Johnson is. So thank you for being on our board. And so by supporting the Tattoo Heritage Project, which is a nonprofit, they are every day trying to keep everything alive that we just talked about. And so we're trying to build awareness. It's more what we're doing is building more awareness for them than we are, being able to be charitable. Certainly, we're going to be asking people to donate, and we're hoping that people will donate to the Tattoo Heritage Project, as well as I'm sure we'll have a box on site and a number of things that we're going to try to generate awareness and some sort of income for them, because they struggle constantly to keep funded. So people at home, if you want to keep tattooing and the history of tattooing alive, donate a little bit of money to the Tattoo Heritage Project. Easily found, and they will be greatly appreciated, and you will be keeping the tattoo industry alive in that history. So we decided to work with them for all the reasons we just talked about. And in my history in tattooing, the industry by and large supports this particular brand and nonprofit. So we're bringing them out there. I know they're touring around on their own, trying to bring kind of a rolling tattoo heritage museum to different events. I think they worked with Troy recently, Bill and Arts. And that's something that I'd like to see happen more. Like in a perfect world, Raven's Nest Productions will have events that we do. And at those events, we'll bring out a small version of the Tattoo Heritage Museum project with us so that we can have people interact with that and become aware of that. That's the ultimate idea. And, the bigger we can get it, the cooler we can do it, the better, right? As we gain money, as they gain money and clout and awareness, we're hoping that that's a reality. So with everything that we're doing with Raven's Nest, it just kind of makes sense to try to support the tattoo community the best of our ability. The brands that we're working with all do the same thing. It's just kind of working with people that you like, that you respect, that are also supporting things that you feel strong about, and that's what we're doing. This is a symbiotic relationship that we're having with everybody. In a general sense, that's how I work, and that's how we're working with this Raven's Nest Productions and everything. Our board members of Raven's Nest Productions consists of some really strong individuals. The people that are instrumental in on our board are Mario Barth, Kevin Royce Johnson from the Tattoo Heritage Project, Sean Hoy, Jeremy from Sullen, Derb Morrison, which is a pretty powerful board, obviously.
Sure, 100%, yeah.
Understand those people, and then we have all these various brands, like I said, that are working with us, that are in kind of on a non-compete kind of leveling playing ground. I guess it's more like with the tattoo contest would be more akin to a tattoo expo where you might have a couple different ink brands and a couple different things. It's like you don't have that Coke Pepsi rivalry, not with us.
Right.
Not with the situation that we have. It doesn't make any sense. So the idea, though, is that to amalgamate everybody's reach, and that's where everybody really gets it anyway. So when you have like Inked Magazine, when you have the Buffalo Chip and all of their reach, they've been very kind enough and generous enough to let us use their decades of reach and demographics. You have Sullen, who has millions in each one of the different categories, whether it's the collective, the art, the clothing.
Right.
It just goes, Intends, True. You have all these, Skin and Ink Magazine, all these brands that are working together so that when we put this marketing out there and whatnot, they're collaborating and they're working together to get it to more people, and I love that idea. And I'm glad that we're able to be that institute that people feel comfortable with, to work with in that regard, and that they're able to kind of lower their defenses to a certain degree and not feel inhibited about working with competing brands.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're doing it that way because I was pretty stoked when I got asked to be a part of it too, and I think it's something that we see a lot in the manufacturing side of things is just the constant rivalry, and it's crazy how detrimental it can be to progress, for the industry as a whole. So I think it's great that you're kind of working to bridge that gap a little bit and bring some brand owners together for an incredible event, and without the politics involved at all, and just everybody working to, like you said, spread awareness and make it a great event for everyone, and just support the effort. And I think we need a lot more of that, especially in today's tattoo community. Like coming up against regulatory stuff just alone is a monumental task that we have to band together to be somewhat successful on the other side of. So I think it's great that you're doing that, and I'm super stoked to be a part of it. And like I've told you every time we've talked, if there's anything that you need from me specifically, or any of my resources, or I'm more than happy to help you or any of the other sponsors of this show for that matter. I love all those people that you talked about, and I've been in spaces with them at one time or another and worked on things with them at one time or another throughout the course of time. So I'm more than happy to be standing next to them people in Sturgis for the event, and super, super proud to be a part of it with you. So I want to thank you for including us.
Absolutely. It's great to meet you too. Like I said, it's really odd that we hadn't met previously, but we have so many of the same associates and whatnot. So it speaks ahead of our even meeting each other in terms of like credibility and whatnot. So I'm grateful too. I've been, really fortunate to have a lot of artists, as well as brands, and just people in general are pretty kind overall to me and the things that I do. I feel very fortunate as a result of that. People want to work with you and be a part of it, like you stated. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the products that Electrum has and find a way to incorporate certain things into the tattoo program at the Buffalo Chip. Be cool to do that. Maybe from this year forward. We started working with True last year, and it's always cool to add new and interesting personalities and brands to the roster. Right? It's to have a stable of artists and brands is a real currency. Um, to have artists that want to work with you because of your reputation, being fair, I guess, and mostly having your shit together is quite it's quite an honor, right? In this day and age. And what I want to perpetuate, not only with Raven's Nest, with myself personally, with the tattoo program at the Buffalo Chip, which we've done with all of my tattoo programs at especially even the Texas Frightmare tattoo program that I just got back from, is that I want to show artists the two things: artists and the clientele side. On the artist side, I want new artists that are coming up, that are being assistants or being a part of this whole thing, to see that you can, the industry can be, kind of semi-fair. It doesn't have to be like malevolent. It doesn't have to be uh, like it can be edgy without being suffocating, and it doesn't have to be too raw and too it can be a really positive experience. I think a lot of times new artists get taken advantage of by people. It's one of these things that you have to learn, just like in life, how to not be taken advantage of. But it shows how you can work with competing brands. You can work with brands. You can have that support. You can have good products, good quality things. You can offer quality work. You can be around people that have different ideologies and different beliefs, but they have common beliefs too. And that is, offering really quality work, being kind to the people, doing the best you can with everybody, offering competitive prices, doing things on a protocol level that aren't unscrupulous. And at the end of the day, you can have a really positive experience. And I'm hoping to show that you can, be an entrepreneur and kind of forge your own way in this world and have a good time doing it. If you do it with all of the things that I just described, and then it doesn't really ever feel like you're going to work, because I don't really, unless I'm not feeling well or there's something extreme happening, I'm overtly tired or something like that. I fucking love what I do on
Right.
all levels, and it never feels like a hassle. It is a lot harder to be an entrepreneur, people at home, because your day doesn't end. It goes on and on and on. The clock stops, but you don't. Things have to continue. And like I said, being present is very, very important. Just being someplace that you think is going to make a difference in your career oftentimes is half the battle. But working with integrity, and taking ownership for when you fuck up, when you make mistakes, when you do things out of course with people, if you can take ownership as quickly as possible, that's really good, and it helps maintain your integrity with them, even if it doesn't go exactly the way you want it to.
Right.
In doing all those things, you could have a really, really cool existence, if you're lucky enough and fortunate enough to have that opportunity, and you see it. You see it. Uh, you see what you have. You see the value in what you're doing. Oftentimes, I see people with a lot of talent, some of the most talented people out there, but they just don't have the focus it takes to have that follow through. There's a lot of
Right.
people start. There's a lot of starters out there, but there's not a lot of finishers.
Right. Right. No, that's great insight and valuable advice for sure. I appreciate hearing that. I'm sure a lot of the listeners are going to appreciate hearing that too, because it's definitely something that we struggle with as human beings for sure. Is taking ownership of when you do things wrong for sure, and just finding ways to come out on top of things and less worse for wear, because you certainly can cause yourself a lot of issues.
I think kind of in kind of closing all of this, as far as like tattoo industry, the way things have changed and whatnot. My thought on it, I'd like to close with this, is that you got to kind of embrace change now. We have to do our very best to maintain the tradition and the history, and also maintain honoring the people who created that. As we move forward, it's real easy to forget them. So however we want to do that, we're going to do that. But also continuing to move forward in the tattoo industry in terms of keeping tradition alive, but you can't stay complacent and stagnant. With everybody getting in the industry, you have a bunch of controversial stuff that's happening that never would have happened 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago, but it is what's happening now. And you got to roll with that stuff. And I can make it akin to the idea that certain things you should fight against, and we can figure out what those things are. But certain things you've just got to embrace, and if you don't embrace them, you will wind up as fossil fuel, like in the La Brea tar pits, right? Um, and not moving forward, right? You don't want to be the gas in somebody's vehicle. You want to at least stay. You want to stay on the cusp of what's going on and
Right.
kind of move with the trends in a positive way, so
Right.
that you don't fall behind, because things are moving um, in a hyperbolic manner. Yeah, I mean that's just kind of the deal. So I know it's hard sometimes for people to embrace some of the changes, but I mean, some things are going to need to be regulated now. You just have too many people in the industry. The tattoo schools, very controversial, but I bet in time, when a bunch of artists that like really want responsible people to work at their shop, who have been really truly vetted, and I mean, I'm not sure, it's a very controversial subject, but in time I see that probably being a thing, the way that any kind of vocation has some certain structure to it. We've
Yeah.
got a place in the tattoo industry where that is happening, and will probably continue to happen. Um, and we can, fight about it all we want, but if we don't come together as an industry outside forces will step in, and they never do things right. It's like someone trying to build a skate park that doesn't have any idea about skateboarding, and they build the stupidest fucking transitions that you can never even skate.
Right.
Just like to have the government come in and play with the tattoo industry. So, we have to do our best to come together and get smart about things, and work above the table to the best of our ability, while simultaneously still trying to remain a subculture and create some sort of anonymity and some sort of edge. Don't know how we do it. I don't have any answers, but we're trying.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned all that, and I appreciate it, because I feel like in my personal world in the tattoo industry these days, especially, I'm finding myself heavily focused on those things, and the preservation of the history, number one. Number two, what we talked about, bridging the gap, between manufacturers and tattoo artists, and really trying to find ways to get us to come together to be the ones that show the government how to build those transitions so that you actually can skateboard them, because we know it's not that they're coming, it's that they're already here, and now we're trying to figure out how do we play nice with them to preserve as much of our craft as we can under our own terms and rules. You know what I mean? To be able to sail our ship the same way we've been sailing our ship for the last 50 years, to some degree.
Totally. And
And
you got those loose cannons out there that make it really complicated for us that aren't doing things in a proper manner. They're not keeping up with standards and quality standards, this kind of a thing. So you have these companies that do well. Sometimes it's an accident. It's just like you can do everything right on a tattoo and it doesn't heal up right. Doesn't mean you're a bad tattoo artist.
right.
There's these anomaly situations, but the larger issue is people are really not giving a shit, just coming in and milking the industry and whatnot. And like bad police or bad anything, you have mostly good people, and then you have a few really awful ones that just kind of fucked the whole situation up for everybody else, really. um, Lack of a better term. But they can stir the pot in an opposite manner and create a real negative situation for everybody who's trying to do things properly. But so we have to embrace those things that are coming up, and do our best to help the younger generation. Like I will never apprentice anybody, but I will, with the right attitude and the right vibe from a young artist, I will tell them and sit with them, or have them sit with me, and I'll talk them through what I know. Similar to what I did with Mikey and Tommy, but I have like a vast amount of knowledge now, that I could offer somebody who's coming up that will certainly help them. And I can do it in a manner that is more laser focused and more direct than the length of time it took me to learn how to tattoo and get to the place that I am. I don't object to YouTube. I wish that I had YouTube when I was growing up, learning how to tattoo. I don't oppose these things that help people ultimately not suck. And
Sure.
I think it's great. I mean, I'm super into it. I'm constantly learning. Tattooing and art is something that there's no ceiling to. The best artists that I look up to are all constantly every day trying to outdo their stuff. I'm constantly, when I'm asked what my favorite tattoo is, it's always the last tattoo that I did on, or that I pushed the limits, that I did really clean. It's never something in the past. It's always something that's coming up, and that's kind of good. That's a good analogy for life. You're trying to one up yourself. You don't want that complacency. So that's kind of where I'm at with all of that, is just kind of trying to stay open to the way things are going to go. Try to stay grounded in tradition and in strong ideology, and that kind of an aspect, while still maintaining my own integrity.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Let's tell people where they can find you on Instagram. Where do you want people to look? You already mentioned Raven's Nest. Talk about what's important, where you want people to go look for you and your stuff.
Okay, cool. Well, I do appointment only, general 365, but in over the last 2.5 years, I took the position as resident artist at the Punk Rock Museum here in Las Vegas. And that was something that I really sought after. And I'm really, really grateful to take that position. It's a very, very important position to me. And I mean, they feel it's very important too, obviously. And that's a whole other story. It's an amazing situation where my whole lifetime in tattooing, art, and music has all come and amalgamated at this one location where I get to be Thursday through Sunday, and people come to me and visit me, and it's the coolest thing. And I get a chance to meet a bunch of people that I hadn't met previously, like in music, that I might admire. And obviously, there's a lot of crossover with the punk rock and the booking and creating shows and all this stuff that I've done for the last 25, 35 years. Those people just kind of come through. So look for me at the Punk Rock Museum Thursday through Sunday, unless I'm out on the road doing something. You can please follow me on Halloween Tattoos on Instagram and Facebook. You can also follow Raven's Nest Productions on Instagram. I would implore you to do that, please. I have a list of sponsors that I put out with every post, or most every post, and I would ask that you all look into those products, look into those brands. They're all tattoo products and brands, and know that they're the best out there. And that's what I'm using on you, and I have been. And check out these things. Check out their aftercare and their lifestyle products. You will not be disappointed. There's a number of different ones. Remember, you can be allergic to things, so you have to have a variety out there. Please read the instructions before you use it, and just know that tattoo experiences should be pretty fun, and you should enjoy your time with the artist. Do your research, check out their art, look at their Instagram, look at their website, do all that kind of stuff. Think about what you want to get as a tattoo, if that's the kind of person you are. Also, be spontaneous if you want to. That's also cool. The only thing I will say is this: I don't tattoo people under 18. That's because I really want you to, as an individual, to have solidified this first idea and have it locked into your mind and soul, so that when you get your very first tattoo, it's not something you regret in the long run. And I often get shit for not taking signatures from both parents on somebody who's under 18. And there would only be a very extreme situation where I would do it. There's been a couple occasions where I've made an exception, right? But in this litigious society, and with the fact that you think about yourself at like 16 to 18, 98% of people don't know what the fuck they want before they're 18.
Right.
So you just hang out, youngsters, get that idea that you have, find a good artist that you want to trust, that you're going to go to when you turn 18 or you're just about there. Hold on to those ideas and then execute them. If you still want it, if you want to get tattooed at 16, you got 24 months till 18. If you still want that idea in 24 months, by God, get that tattoo where you want it. That's my advice to you people at home.
That's great advice. It's great advice. Well, Shaun, I really thank you for spending, the last 2 hours with me today. And it's been great to get to know more about you and all the things that make you you. And I'm looking forward to learning more when I get to meet you in person in a couple of months.
Yeah,
And
that's Sturgis, man. I appreciate your time. And, if you need anything from me, please reach out. We'll be talking about the Tattoo Cafe a little bit, and, what products that we're missing out there that you might be able to, be a part of. Either way, we're going to have a good time. And the fun factor out in Sturgis is so high that it's kind of like being on a desert island together, where, you're in this environment where you get in and you get out together, and you always have that memory because it was such a unique experience. So I'm hoping this year should be really fun in that regard.
well, I'm super excited. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm actually can't wait to be there and doing it. Not trying to rush you there because I know you got a lot of work to do to get there still, but I'm super stoked and looking forward to seeing what goes down and being a part of it. So again, thank you for including me.
Absolutely, you guys. Thank you. I appreciate your time. And I'll be seeing you soon. Everybody at home, thank you so much. And again, I can't thank all of you that have been very supportive of me and have trusted in my ideas over the last 3 decades, and these crazy experimental concepts that are artistic. And you just trusted me to get it off the ground and be a good leader. Thank you. I can't fucking thank you all enough.
All right.
Bye.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Business of Tattooing. I appreciate you tuning in and being part of this journey to level up the industry one conversation at a time. If you found value in today's episode, do me a favor. Subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another artist who could use this knowledge. Got questions or topics you want me to cover? Hit me up on Instagram at NoFlashNinja or email me at rob@electrumsupply.com. And remember, tattooing is an art, but running a successful business is a skill. Keep pushing, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time on The Business of Tattooing.